For this week's Preppin data, we were working with lots of sheets in the same Excel workbook, and in each of those sheets there were different tables, in fact. So if we take a look, once we've cleaned our input with the data interpreter, we see that we've got a store name and then two different tables on that Excel worksheet. So the top table, the one that we're interested in, is relating to our key metrics here, whereas the second table is referring to some additional metrics which we're not interested in as part of this challenge. So I'm interested to see if there's a better way to do this, but I think what's frustrating is that it's quite manual to go and pick up each one of these tables rather than being able to do a wildcard union. So that's how I've chosen to do it. Each of our union steps can only take in 10 our input files. So we've got the first 10 here and then the final 2 over here. So we're just unioning those first 10 together. We get our table names, which helps us to refer to which of store it's coming from. And then our final 2, we union those together as well. And then we union together those 2. So we still have all the table names in one field so that we can extract those store names. So if we go ahead and do that, sorry, shop is what I've chosen to use here rather than store. So those shop names. So the way that I chose to extract those, if we see our table names there, we can see a common way that they are structured is that there's the file name and then a slash and then the shop name. Then there's a $ before it specifies the cell range. So we could use a series of splits, but I chose to write a regex formula just so that it's calculated in one formula. So I did a regex extract saying that we have something, then we have a slash, then what we want to extract is something before this $. So remember, we need to use the \$ in this instance because it is a special character in regex. And then there's, again, something else will follow the $. We're not interested in that. So that's how I've chosen to do that. And then we can just remove that table names field because we have our shop names. Okay. Now, if we take a look at the table that we're working with, then what we can see is that we've got our shop name, our department, which tells if it's complaints, orders, or returns that we're looking at. We've got targets associated with each of these breakdown metrics, and we can see that we've got some metric names here before we go on to the actual figures, which are each month name, and then we have a quarter which gives us the overview, and then we go back to the months. Okay, so we don't want these quarters, so we're going to go ahead in our next step and we're going to remove any of those fields that say FY22, Q1, Q2, Q3. Okay, so now that we've done that, we're going to pivot our data so that we have all of our dates in one field and then our values in the other field. So doing a wildcard pivot here, so we're searching for the dash. Okay, now we'll just change that date to a date data type. So pivot one name, so we'll change that to be a date and rename it to be date so that it picks up and shows us what month we're currently looking at. Okay, and it's only going up to April here because we're still in May, so we don't have May's data yet. Okay, so we have some instructions that we don't actually want to look at all of these metrics, so we're going to do some excluding of metrics now. So if we go to our measure names, then you can see that what we've chosen to do here, so I chose to use the filtering here, so go to filter and then selected values. That writes this calculation in the background. Okay, so it's saying we want to only keep the percentages here and the number received for the complaints. Those are the only ones that we want to track. So now that we've filtered it to the correct metrics that we're actually interested in, then we want to rename these so that we have our number complaints received, percentage orders shipped, for example. So we want to just split this up quickly. So we do a quick split on the first space so we get that numeric field. Then we replace our metric title. So if you see here, we're going to replace our breakdown with that split off value so that we get rid of that percentage sign or the numeric sign. Then we just rename our measure name so we have our that hash sign or that percentage sign plus a space, then the department name and plus the breakdown, so that's just renamed. So we're combining basically our department with our breakdown field to get our measure names there. Okay, and we're only keeping these relevant fields to us, so the shop, the date, the measure name, and the values, so that we can then pivot that so that we have a field per metric. Okay, so we just put our measure name up in the top here. We're doing a rows to columns pivot, and we put our pivot 1 values down the bottom there. Now for the targets, if we have a look here, then what we have is all of our targets associated with these metrics. So we're going to rename our measure names so that we have the word target dash in front of them. So now we have the target associated with each of those metrics. And we want to clean up these targets a little bit as well. But firstly, we just want it to make it the measure name and the target. And that's just simplifying our table a lot for us there. And we want to just change this to be numeric so that instead of greater than 80%, it just says 0.8 because that's our target to achieve. So we remove the punctuation by, when it's a string field, we have the clean option. So when I go back to here, then I can go to the clean option and I remove the punctuation. That gets rid of my percentage signs. To get rid of this greater than sign, I do need to do a quick replace formula to replace it with nothing. Use the float function to make it numeric and then divide it by 100. And then we have our numeric targets there. Now you'll see that I have this dummy step in each of them, so this is just adding a 1 field there. The reason I need a dummy before I pivot is because I can't pivot if I've only got 2 fields. It needs 1 reference field there as well, 1 field that stays over here. So I'm pivoting my rows to columns again with my measure names and just with my target there as well. And then with that dummy field that I have here, I'm going to add that into this one as well. So it's just literally a calculation that's called dummy. It has a 1 in it, so I can join these back together. So that now for each of my metrics, I have a target associated with that, and it will just be an extra field next to it. So after a bit of rearranging of the fields, you can see that we have our percentage of order shipped in 3 days next to our target. So we can just quickly read over and see if that's above or below the target. You can understand how that would be useful to work with in Tableau to be able to have that in this structure to just be able to quickly compare and contrast the targets. Okay, and then we just output our data. So hopefully that was useful, and thanks very much for watching.